Welcome to the second session of the Remarkable Women, Powerful Stories, a leadership series by Zonta International. Today we have a broad global audience with participants from so many different time zones. I thank you most sincerely for choosing to spend the next 45 minutes with me and our very special guests at our second conversation. I'm Lynn Foley, the Chairman of the Zonta International Leadership Development Committee, and it's an honour and a privilege to host this leadership series. I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also pay that respect to any First Nations people present. Zonta International is a leading global organisation of professionals empowering women worldwide through service and advocacy. In 1919, a small group of founders in Buffalo, New York, had a vision to help all women realise greater equality. Today, more than 28,000 members in 63 countries work together to make gender equality a worldwide reality for women and girls. Since 1923, Zonta International has provided more than $41.2 million to empower women and girls and expand their access to education, healthcare, economic opportunities and safe living conditions. My guest today is Tiaji Sio. Tiaji is a 24-year-old Afro-German diplomat who currently serves as an Attache for Economic Affairs and Development Cooperation at the German Embassy in Hanoi, Vietnam. Simultaneously, she's pursuing an MSc in International Development online at the University of Edinburgh. After completing her undergraduate degree at the German Foreign Service Academy in 2018, she immediately began her full-time employment in the German Foreign Service and held different positions in Berlin, Dakar and Maputo. In 2019, she founded the Diplomats of Color network, the first and largest diversity and inclusion network within the federal government. As a pioneer in promoting diversity, equity and inclusion in the German public administration, she was listed in the 2020 Forbes 30 Under 30 list. She was also nominated for the Digital Female Leaders Award and serves as an ambassador for the Beyond Gender Agenda campaign. In 2015, she was an international recipient of the Zonta International Young Women in Public Affairs Award. Welcome to you, Tiaji. It's lovely to have you with us today.
Hello.
That's it. We have you now on audio. It's lovely to have you with us today. And I know that our guests, all of our audience today, will be absolutely thrilled by your remarkable story. Your career and professional achievements are truly astonishing and inspiring so early in your leadership pathway. I know that the audience today will be most interested in knowing more about you, your achievements and your aspirations. So to begin, I'd like to ask you to share just a little about your family and education background and what motivated you to choose the diplomatic service as your career.
Yeah, sure. So I am from Frankfurt. I was raised in Frankfurt, Germany, but my parents are from Liberia and from Guinea and from Germany. So I have quite an international background. And yeah, right after graduating from high school, I moved to Berlin to attend the Foreign Service Academy to do a 3-year training program. And yeah, and ever since then, I've been with the Foreign Service and I've worked in several countries. And right now I am calling in from Vietnam, where I work at the German Embassy.
That's fabulous. So what caused you to choose the diplomatic service as your career, Tiaji?
I think it's because I was always interested in exploring other countries and learning about new cultures and languages. And yeah, and during high school, I got interested in foreign policy and politics. I was a part of the European Youth Parliament and I attended Model United Nations conferences. So I was really intrigued to actually pursue a career where I can apply the skills I've learned in high school and actually further them and apply them in the real world. So, yeah.
So you mentioned in passing interested in languages. So from what I know of you and our earlier conversations, you speak a number of languages. So
well, a few. Well, my first languages are English and German, and I speak French and a little bit of Chinese, and now I'm trying to learn Vietnamese, but it's quite difficult. So, yeah.
Yeah, we had that conversation earlier in the month, didn't we, about the difficulties of the Vietnamese language for those of us with European language backgrounds. And I know when I lived and worked there 10 or 12 years ago in Hanoi, I had extreme difficulty being understood. I could understand and not be understood very well. So, yeah, very, very challenging. So you just in passing mentioned a couple of your leadership roles and experiences that you had during school and university. Are there any others that you think formed or are continuing to form your desire to work in the Foreign Service?
I think for me, one of the most formative experiences was when I attended a student exchange during high school to New Delhi in India. And for me, that was the first time actually being outside of kind of the global north. And so for me, it was really interesting to make these friendships with people that were raised in an entirely different culture than I have. And so at the same time, I saw that some people's realities were completely different than mine. So I think that was the moment. That was I think when I was in 8th grade, and that was the moment when I personally decided I really want to do something to kind of lift other people up and to work together to improve the lives of everyone. And so I became really interested in development cooperation and diplomacy.
Wow, so all of those experiences that you had through school and a university have really formed for now what your career choices are. I'm also aware that you have a lot of passions, that you're a very passionate young woman with lots of passions that are driving you in your life. What's top of your list right now? What's something that you're really, really passionate about?
Yeah. I mean, at the moment, and I think you've already mentioned that in the beginning when introducing me, I'm really involved in kind of furthering diversity and inclusion in the Foreign Service. And in 2019, I founded the Diplomats of Color network, which is a network for Black people and people of color who work in the German Foreign Service. So at the moment, we're really driving that process of diversifying not only for the Foreign Service, but the German public administration as a whole. And that's something I'm really passionate about because I'm a Democrat. I'm a great supporter of democratic systems, and I feel like our democracy in Germany can be even stronger when the entire population is represented in leadership positions in the government, and that's what we're trying to achieve with Diplomats of Color.
And we'll talk some more about Diplomats of Color Network shortly, but as well. So with that as your main passion, I know you've got lots of others, but your main one, how does that influence what you do in your work in the embassy in Hanoi? Do you think that passion is influencing how you work with the people in your projects in Hanoi?
I mean, what I like is to kind of critically reflect on kind of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I feel like at the moment, when working in development cooperation, for example, I think it's always a good skill to take a step back and kind of reflect on kind of the purpose of what we are trying to achieve and be open-minded towards the ideas of others and be very attentive of what is actually needed on the ground. So I feel like in that sense, those skills do help me, and that drive does help me in my job. But I feel like in general, it's quite different contexts really to be on the one hand, I don't know, for example, working on specific projects here in Vietnam, but then on the other hand, with Diplomats of Color, it's more of an administrative issue and kind of working towards strengthening our democratic legitimacy as a country in the global north. So yeah.
That's fabulous. Actually, I was just reflecting as you were speaking there, and I looked behind me on my wall, and one of the pictures that you can see on my wall tonight is actually a weaving that I bought when I was working in Vietnam. And I went, oh, wow, that's, there's pride of place on this wall in this house. And I just noticed that as you were speaking. So maybe we're right on the theme this evening. You've become an extremely visible role model, particularly through the Diplomats of Color network. And since perhaps late last year and into this year, with the Diplomats of Color, as I've just mentioned, the Forbes being noted in the Forbes list, and some of the other achievements already on your calendar this year. How do you embrace that place as a role model? Because as a woman and a woman of colour, you're certainly that. So how do you embrace that, and what does that mean for you to be a role model?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to learn to embrace it, because for me it's still a rather new position, especially considering that I'm still really early on in my career and still rather young. So it's a role I'm trying to grow into. But then on the other hand, what really inspires me is that we as a network receive a lot of messages and emails with people, young people actually feeling empowered and inspired to actually pursue a career in diplomacy. So for me, that's a really big inspiration, and that kind of reassures me that we are on the right track. And also, I do know that I'm quite visible in the network, but I do know that there's a whole team involved. We're around 7 people who actively work on our projects, and then in the wider networks, there are 150 people. So I do know that it's not only me alone, and obviously I couldn't do it by myself. So I see the success and the recognition as kind of a recognition for the entire team. Yeah, and I would say, concerning maybe the second question, what does it mean to be a role model? I feel like it's just being visible and being a good example for the next generation. And I feel like that's what I'm trying to be by breaking down structural barriers to make foreign policy more inclusive.
Excellent, thank you. That's really interesting to hear, because becoming a role model often sneaks up on us, doesn't it? It's like one day we're not, and the next day we are becoming a role model, and we get caught out sometimes, and then realizing what it means and how we can, I guess, leave that legacy for other people around us and to help them meet their aspirations. The other word I use to describe you is a trailblazer for women in your field, and being named, as I said just recently, as the top 50 to watch in Germany. I picked that up from your LinkedIn profile, and you're as a diversity driver in the Beyond Gender agenda. And then I noticed that just on Monday of this week, you were a speaker at a lunch conversation with the Centre for Feminist Foreign Policy. So 2021 is bringing more recognition, which is putting you in the public eye. What are your, I think we're all interested in knowing, what are your key aspirations for your work in the field of diversity, equity and inclusion? So as you continue to broaden and work in that, can you help us understand what your aspirations might be?
I mean, ultimately, my aspiration would be that our work is not necessary anymore, and that kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion have become key features of the government administration, not only in Germany, but anywhere in the world, really, because yeah, we're living in a globalized world, and countries are becoming more and more diverse. So for me, the logical consequence is that people in political positions and people in leadership positions need to reflect that diversity of the population. And so, yeah, my aspiration would be that that becomes the norm, and that everyone feels represented.
Lovely. I always have to ask this question of my guests on this program. Do you describe yourself as a feminist?
Yes, 100%. To me, feminism means gender equity, equity for everyone, no matter what gender. And feminism to me means intersectionality, so acknowledging intersecting forms of discrimination and recognizing your own privileges. And to me, feminism is such a broad term. I feel like all these concepts are incorporated in that concept. So I'm definitely a feminist.
Definitely a feminist. And I guess I could follow up and say what led to that. I think if we look back at our own history and our own family history, there's always something in the background that takes us there, isn't there? So is there something from your family and family group that I guess provided that platform for you to roll through to become a feminist, or was it just born into you?
That's a tough question. I would say yes, that my parents definitely taught me that, you know, I can do anything. I never had the feeling that I was limited in a way. So yeah, it might be a part of my upbringing, but then again, like feminist theory, that's something I kind of learned more about during my academic journey. So for example, I wrote my undergraduate thesis on Resolution 1325 by the United Nations, which is about women, peace, and security, and how women involvement in peace processes actually accelerate these processes. So I definitely think that, you know, my upbringing set the foundation, but then it's all about constantly learning, and even now I'm still learning. So yeah, that's also a part.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you. Excellent. Our audience will also, I think, be interested in hearing how you're working towards achieving your leadership and career aspirations, and developing your skills as a leader. You're early on, I know, in that career, but how are you going about that?
I try to have role models myself and to have mentors. I feel like when you're trying to be a leader or to lead a transformative process, which is not always easy, especially when you're within or confined by barriers of a very kind of bureaucratic system, it's always good to have experienced mentors, and people who you trust to really ask tough questions. And yeah, and just being open-minded. And also at the moment, you know, you always have certain notions, certain ideas that you deeply believe in, but the ability to really reflect upon that and also possibly change some of your opinions and some of your views, the ability to take on a different perspective and try to feel what, or to see what another person might think about a certain issue. I think that's always a good way to build bridges and to also overcome that kind of that split we have. I feel like, and I don't know how it is in other countries, but in Germany, I feel like, especially at the moment, there are so many right-wing people that feel scared and feel secluded within their own country. And then on the other hand, there are so many progressive thinkers and leaders. So kind of how can we bridge that gap and create more unity within our diverse country?
And that's a very big aspiration, but I agree, it's really important, isn't it, to somehow bring those two sides together, because it feels like they're sides. What do you think are the characteristics that remarkable leaders have in common? So when you see or work with a remarkable leader, what are some of the characteristics that you believe are really obvious to you?
I would say maybe just that ability to be able to understand the perspectives of a lot of people and kind of not only be in that sphere of political elites or leaders and be amongst them, but take a step back and look at what other peoples from all parts of society would think about a certain issue, take that up and include it into your work. I would say that's what makes a remarkable leader.
And we're surrounded by so many remarkable leaders. What do you think are your greatest gifts that support you as a remarkable woman?
Okay, that's also a tough question. It's always kind of, it's easier to criticize yourself than to highlight your strengths. But I would say, I'm good at kind of explaining my point of view to others. I think that's really helpful, especially when in the context that we work in with Diplomats of Color. I feel like the topic of racism and discrimination is something that everybody has an opinion on, and it's something that's really polarizing. So yeah, the ability to clearly state what you want to say without making it too emotional or too biased. I would say that's really important, especially when at the end of the day, you want to initiate a policy change or a change of mindset within, the political sphere. So it's always good to, even though it's hard, to kind of be a little bit emotionally distanced from that. And I think that's something I've learned during the past months. Yeah.
Excellent. So many women I work with and that I know ask how they can develop strong self-confidence and self-belief and claim their space. By claim their space, I mean be able to put that opinion forward when they've got the opportunity at that table, at that decision-making table that you referenced earlier, that we need to have women at the decision-making table. So do you have some ideas that might help our audience today as to how you've gone about developing that self-confidence and self-belief and the ability to just put your opinions forward?
I would say, it's mainly believing in yourself and believing in your skills, but then at the same time also constantly working on those skills and developing your skill set, and trying to be confident to speak up, because I feel like, especially for women, sometimes and also I think that was kind of, you could see that in the previous question, we're always trying to make us a little bit smaller than we are and trying to kind of fit that societal image of a woman. But I feel like that's kind of something we don't necessarily need to do. And especially when you want to be in a leadership position, it's really important to kind of, in a world surrounded by men, you kind of need that self-confidence to actually make your voice heard, and then also take opportunities. I would say, yeah, try not to be afraid to challenge yourself. Yeah.
And sometimes it's a case of, what's the worst thing that can happen if I put my opinion forward? Well, that someone doesn't hear it or someone doesn't like it. And I often say, well, the world will keep turning if somebody doesn't like the idea that we put forward. So it's having the courage to believe that our opinions are worthy and to put them forward regardless of whether they're heard the first time. And if they're important enough, say it again. Eventually you get heard, I think, Tiaji. It's interesting in that developing confidence and self-belief, and it takes time. When your confidence or resilience are low, who or what do you rely on to help bring you back or boost your confidence?
I would definitely say family and friends. They're the ones who sometimes see more potential in me than I do. So whenever I feel low, or when I don't know, get a lot of criticism or so, I try to speak to my friends who then really encourage me and show me that I am supposed to be in that space, and that, you know, my ideas are worth spreading. So for me, that's definitely friends and family.
Thank you. So now let's move to the challenge part. What's been your toughest challenge or roadblock as a leader? Because I know that's what our people watching and listening today really want to know. Have you had a tough challenge or roadblock as a leader? And how have you worked, or are you working to overcome this challenge?
Yeah, I feel like there are so many challenges, but oftentimes publicly you only announce all the amazing opportunities that have worked out, but you don't necessarily see all the setbacks. And for me personally, I would say the most shocking or the biggest challenge for me was when I first, or we as a network, published a video last year on the social media channels of the Federal Foreign Office. And it was a short video published on Diversity Day, where we promoted diversity and inclusion, and we encouraged young people of color to apply to the Foreign Service. And that video, which was a really short 1-minute video, was kind of met by a really strong negative backlash by the far right. And people were attacking me personally and were saying, you know, kind of taking something away from real Germans and comments like that. So for me, that was the first time putting myself out there and then being met with so much criticism and negativity. And then later on, the AfD party, which is a far-right party in the German parliament, kind of sent 2 parliamentary inquiries to my employer. And, you know, there's, I've realized that as you gain more attention and as your voice is being heard by more people, there's also more space for being attacked. So that was definitely something that I had to deal with and cope with. And that was definitely a challenge in the beginning, but I feel like now, knowing how much support I am getting, not only from people who see me and feel inspired to be a diplomat or to be in a political position, but even by my colleagues in the Foreign Service, by the political leadership of the Foreign Ministry, even the Foreign Minister then retweeted that video. All of that showed me that there's so much support and so much potential in what we're trying to do. So that definitely showed me and reassured me that our idea is really worth spreading. And yeah.
So really, in your case, it was that support and inspiration. and just working it through and knowing that the work you're doing is good work and worthy work, and it's on behalf of so many people in that diversity, gender and inclusion space. Yeah, that's a challenging time that you've been through, and I assume you're still going through, and it's quite public, so that makes it harder, doesn't it? You seem to be handling it pretty well.
But then again, for me, it's always really good to speak to my family and friends about it, and to kind of get that reassurance that that's just a really small minority that just is very well organized, and they are they're kind of on the internet, they're quite loud voices. But I would say that the majority of Germans and the majority of people actually do support our work, because at the end of the day, it's beneficial to everyone and to the entire society if everyone is represented.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I mentioned earlier that when you were at school or towards the end of school, you were an international winner of the Zonta Young Women in Public Affairs Award in 2015. How did this support you, or what did that mean for you at the time?
Well, that was the first big prize I had ever won, and I was quite surprised that I was chosen first. You know, it was on the regional level, which was already a very big surprise and a big honor, and then I got the information that I got selected for the district level as well, and then even for the international level, I think I was 1 out of 10 international awardees. So for me, that was a huge honor. I was, I think, 17 or 18 at the time, and that definitely gave me the confidence and kind of the reassurance that what I'm doing, as you know, I had a few volunteer positions in high school. I was involved in a couple of extracurricular activities, so that's kind of how my commitment for serving the public good started, and that gave me the reassurance that that's a good thing and that it's even being rewarded, even though I would have never expected such a big prize. So yeah, that was definitely just a huge honor, and also it gave me that Zonta network. Later on, I've been to Nice to the international convention, and I've met amazing women, not only as mentors or as role models, but also among the young women that received the YWPA award or other awards. There was like a regional group in Frankfurt. So that network, I'm definitely still in touch with them. So that's also a great side effect.
And that's fabulous. And in fact, as I'm just looking at the list of questions coming in for us shortly, there's a lot of your colleagues from Zonta in Germany are commenting on how excellent you are. There's lots of supportive comments coming in, so I just thought I'd share that with you. We'll be moving to a close for the conversation and the questions. So before I move to a close, I have a couple of really important questions I want to ask you. We all know that Zonta envisions a world where women's rights are recognised as human rights and every woman is able to achieve her full potential. And we focus on empowering women and girls. How do you see things changing for women in the next decade, and particularly for women of colour?
Well, I see us gaining much more importance in political positions, in business, in science, and in so many different fields where we're still underrepresented. And I feel like within the next 10 years, we'll definitely achieve that goal, because there's so many remarkable women that are working on that goal. And not only women, men alike. I feel like in that sense, we all need to be feminists. And maybe my second point is that I feel like what will also change is the way we see gender. At the moment, I feel it's a very binary way of thinking, and we mainly focused on women because they've been traditionally kind of the oppressed group. But within the next 10 years, I feel like our consciousness about non-binary genders will expand, and we'll see gender equity as our main goal. And we'll also regard intersectionality, so really promoting women of color as our main goal. Yeah.
So what's next for you? What are your goals and ambitions for the next 3 to 4 years?
Yeah.
If you project yourself forward, what's next?
Well, I don't know. I'm still open, but for Diplomats of Color, for sure, we want to expand our network and scale it up, and also kind of take Diplomats of Color as an example to establish diversity networks across the German public administration, and that's something we've already started. There's already a network within the Ministry for Development, and we're trying to establish one network in each of the 14 federal ministries and kind of create an interministerial diversity network. What we're also trying to do is really bring our ideas to the policy level and try to establish the legal framework to actually make diversity management happen in public administration.
Yeah. So, and I guess what you're doing there has application globally as well, outside your own country. So it has potential for all sorts of things in the future. So as we move to close the conversation and move to questions from our audience today, what's one thought you want to leave with everyone listening today? Because the people listening and watching today come from many different countries, and they're in many different time zones at the moment. And many different ages and backgrounds. So what's a thought you'd like to leave with everyone today?
I mean, considering that we are all from different countries, I feel like what we tend to forget is, or what we tend to do is to focus on our own perspective, on our own position. So my thought or my challenge would be to expand that horizon and think about how can we create an equitable life for all, no matter where in the world you were born, where you were raised, what your nationality is, and then think about the ways we are connected in our common humanity and how can we really improve our lives collectively. And I think that should be kind of our aspiration behind our actions. And maybe just to end or to bridge that or to make that connection to my work with Diplomats of Color, what we're trying to do is to say, no matter what you look like, no matter what your name is, you do have a voice, and your voice is worth hearing on a political level and in a leadership position. And we're trying to do that not only for Germany, but for Europe, for other countries as well. And so, yeah, my final remark.
That's a lovely thought and reflection to leave as we move out of the conversation to questions. And I've got quite a lot of questions coming in. So to our audience today, in my world, I'm beaming in from Australia, from Toowoomba in Queensland, Australia, and it's around 10:39 p.m. and I know Tiaji's it's heading past 7:30 p.m. in Hanoi. And people are on at varied times. And our support team in Chicago at Zonta International, of course, it's very early in the morning. So the first question I have is, what kind of projects are you pursuing concretely at the German Embassy in Hanoi at the moment? What types of projects?
So here at the Embassy, I'm working in the section for Economic Affairs and Development Cooperation. A huge part of our portfolio is around the idea of promoting renewable energies, climate change, circular economy. So in a country like Vietnam, that's kind of been growing economically, and that's kind of on the verge to becoming, a developed country. We're trying to really promote that idea of sustainability. So yeah.
Another question that follows on a totally different field. Tell us about your favourite travel and cultural experiences. And where do you think you might like to work after Vietnam? Because I know you have a few years of your tenure there, but where might you like to go next?
Yeah. Well, I've worked at the German embassy in Senegal for 2 months in 2019, and that was definitely one of my favorite travels so far. It's also where I got that lovely painting behind me. And yeah, and I was really positively surprised by the openness of the population. I felt instantly connected and at home. So that was definitely one of my favorite trips. And I could definitely see myself working there again. But also I would like to, I've never been to Liberia, which is where my father is from. So I would really love to travel there and get to know the country and maybe even work there.
So some plans to expand those cultural experiences as you grow older and you have more career experiences. Let's see what else I have on the question poll. Here's another one. How do your colleagues in the embassy perceive you since you've become so public? That's a tough question. That's a tough question from Naja.
I mean, some of them know about it, some don't even know. But I think most of them are really supportive. Yeah, as long as I'm doing, my job properly, my actual job. It's just, what I do with Diplomats of Color. It's what I do kind of as a volunteer job. So I guess they support it, but honestly, I don't really talk to them that much about them. Yeah.
Fabulous. So let's see what else is popping into the questions. Just give me a second. Here's another one. What advice can you give young women who want to follow a similar career path like yours?
Well, just apply. And maybe think about whether kind of what level you want to aim at. If you want to be more, for example, in the diplomatic service, there's so many different career tracks. So you would really need to think about whether you really want to work more on a political level or administration or languages. So that would be a good start to think about what kind of subjects interest you, and then choose your studies.
One of our other people watching today, has asked, how do you define non-binary gender? You mentioned it a couple of times on the way through, so there's one of our audience interested in that.
Personally, I don't identify as non-binary, but from conversations I've had is people that neither want to say I'm a woman or a man. There's some people that want to be addressed who don't care, who you can use any pronoun with. Some people prefer them or they. Some people who are kind of intersex, like who were born with both genders or both sexes. So I feel like it's a really broad spectrum of what non-binary can mean. It's not really one particular thing. Yeah.
Okay. So just scrolling down. Sorry, just give me a second. I've got to find the question. Another one of your German colleagues is interested in how do you go about finding friends in Hanoi? I know you've been there since about August last year. So what's it been like finding a broad group of friends?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about Vietnam is that it's handling the COVID-19 pandemic really well. The cases here are really, really low, so a lot of the venues and restaurants and bars are still open. And also activities. So me personally, I like to dance salsa and to do yoga. So
Hey.
through activities, yeah, it's really easy to find new people. Um, yeah, especially salsa. I feel like you can dance salsa anywhere in the world, especially when it's not during a pandemic. But yeah.
Yeah. There's another really interesting question here. Have you found that racism is an issue in Vietnam? So as you have blended in with the community there, what's your comment on that?
Um, Honestly, I'm positively surprised. Like, for example, when I walk around the city here, nobody really notices me or looks at me in a weird way. But when I walk around in Germany, most of the times people do look, or I do get some stares. Actually, here, mm, I feel like I'm just, a normal part of society. So I personally don't make those negative encounters. But I do know that, especially in the northern parts of Vietnam, there's some ethnic minorities who are being discriminated against. So I think that's more maybe of an internal issue within Vietnam. And actually, we're considering funding a small-scale project there for ethnic minorities to enable them to be employed more easily. So that's something that's kind of that we're currently working on. So it's not fully confirmed yet, but yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to kind of make an impact on a small scale.
Have you had a chance to travel yet into the north, up into the north of Hanoi to where some of the ethnic minority groups live?
Not yet,
Yeah,
but
it's fabulous.
if we do that project, I'm sure I will travel there.
It
Yeah.
was one of the highlights of my time when I worked in Hanoi with the Ministry of Education and Training was a trip up to a province in the north and to see it from the education perspective, because I'm an educator, and yeah, it was just something that I will always remember. It's fabulous. So I do hope you get to do that. What's your take on people who believe that Black Lives Matter movement should be called All Lives Matter?
Oh, where should I start? I think it's a very problematic
You've probably got
sentence.
about a minute, so.
I mean, when you look at the history of people of African descent all over the world, it's not confined to a specific country. There's such a history of oppression and discrimination, not only on an interpersonal level, but on a structural level. So when you look at the reality of Black lives literally being killed, then it's important to specifically address that Black lives matter. And obviously, all lives matter. But when you look at a specific problem, then you have to specifically address that problem. And so it's important to stress that Black lives also matter. Yeah.
And so I'm going to fit in two more questions, and then we probably need to head to wrapping up the session. How do you think you'll be able to manage your family life and your diplomatic career going forward? So that's like a future question.
Yeah, I don't know yet. I mean, for me, I think, yeah, far in the future. But I would say, I don't know what it's like in other diplomatic services, but I know that for the German diplomatic service, there are some opportunities for partners to work. There are more and more kind of bilateral agreements that partners can work in the host country. There are a lot of international schools all around the world, or German schools where kids can go to schools even though they're not fluent in the language of the country they're in. So yeah, there are some ways, and yeah.
And I think most countries now are much better at helping both men and women manage family life in different ways. And this will be the last question. I've covered most of the questions that people have asked today, but this will be the last question and then we'll move to close. It's from Marion Azonchin in Canada. In Canada and most countries, we're immersed in the preparations for International Women's Day, which is coming along very shortly. Will you be doing anything special on March the 8th for International Women's Day?
Yes, I will, but I don't think I can say that yet publicly. So you'll have to stay tuned.
So they'll have to find you on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever and here. So, well, let me know when you're allowed to be public about it, Tiaji, because we've promised to stay in touch. So you let me know and I'll see if I can filter that out into the Zonta network. So it sounds like you've got something special coming along. So yes, we'll look forward to maybe being able to be part of that. And there is another one here. Looking at Zonta today, have you got any ideas for encouraging other leaders to join us in our efforts? That's a hard one to. That's a hard one to.
It's a hard question. I mean, maybe what helps or what you're trying to do. I always try to kind of speak from my experience with Diplomats of Color, and what we're trying to do to get more people involved is to make our efforts as accessible as possible to anyone, and to make kind of everyone relate to our cause and our issues. For example, Diplomats of Color really sounds like a really exclusive network just for people of color who happen to be diplomats. But we're actually a quite inclusive network, and we recently established the DOC and Allies network, which means anyone can join even though they don't identify as people of color. And so we're constantly trying to make our efforts more accessible, to get more people involved, to get more leaders involved, and I think that might also work for other contexts.
Lovely, thank you, Tiaji. So I'm going to head to a wrap, as they say in the industry. So I want to thank you so much, Tiaji, for your powerful and enlightening story with us today. I know that everyone who's been online will have found something really interesting, and there's so many comments, and we'll certainly try and find a way to send them to you about you being a phenomenon and you being amazing and inspiring and wonderful. So there's so many comments coming through that you're not able to see. So please go away from our conversation today knowing that you have significant support through the Zonta and broader global audience that have come today. And you are truly a remarkable woman. And we will follow your journey and pathway over the years, all of us, and we'll be looking for the difference you make and the legacy you leave, and how you take your special leadership capabilities and your ideas forward to make a difference in the world. So on behalf of Zonta International, I wish to underscore the importance of the Zonta International Foundation for Women, and the donations to this foundation are welcome, and you can choose to support a range of programs such as the Young Women in Public Affairs with individual or club donations. And the work of Zonta really does rely on donations to ensure the path to empowering women and girls and achieving gender equality is made a little easier. This leadership series is scheduled each month, and I'll be very excited to see you at the next session planned for the 24th of March US Central Time. Spread the word to all your friends and to your colleagues and to family, and watch out for the promotion of this next webinar. You should start seeing promotions early in the month of March. And we have many remarkable women already lined up for coming months this year. So once again, it's an honour and a privilege to be providing this little event each month to engage all of us around the lives of remarkable women. So Tiaji, once again, thank you. And thank you for your time in preparing and being with us this evening. And go forward and inspire, and we wish you well as you work towards meeting all your aspirations. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody.